Yeah, you want to go ahead and ask?
Hello, yeah. So from this November, every quarter, we also plan to do DCT Japan series. Basically, this is a 6 or 7 clinical research companies, and then we also invited hospital heads of hospital because they are the ones who have to integrate these into their sites. And then at the same time, we also are bringing a regulatory body as well for the first time who wants to listen what's happening. So if you are around in Tokyo, please join there. I'm usually based in Tokyo almost most of my year, unless I'm traveling to Boston. So yeah, this basically the idea here also is the same. We also want to bring more CROs, more pharma, hospitals as well, and see if we could actually create more voices around how we could do a validated, clinically validated DCT. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so if you're in Tokyo, send us a message. We'll make the connections there. If you'd like to participate now, we're in about 18 different countries. We've done business in about 30 to 40. So we're a global company of about 100 team members. Started about 7 years ago. And working this past couple years, as Eddie mentioned, on more on the platform side, DCTs, decentralized clinical trials. We have over 100 pharma clients, over 118 projects during that time, and now kind of moving into the platform space. We've kind of gone from SaaS to the platform to now super platform, end-to-end solutions and global ecosystems. So yeah, Addie's fluent in Japanese, lifelong resident in Japan. That's where we met. I was in Taiwan. I lived in Greater Asia and East Asia for 12 years, Europe for 3 years, and Addie and I met over there 5-6 years ago. It was about 6 years now. I was in Taiwan, he was in Japan, and we came together. I was more on the healthcare side, he was on the team on the life science pharma side, so that's kind of our story. Well, if you'd like, I can, let's see, do I have maybe a printout, or maybe you could just introduce, I was going to introduce Addie, and I already introduced, so maybe we could just go down the line and have each of the panelists introduce themselves, maybe for 1 minute. Shamir, please.
Hi everybody, I'm Khader. I'm a global head of computational biology. I'm part of a function in Sanofi. We are a function called Precision Medicine and Computational Biology. Really excited about how to make our trials more optimized, more precise, so that we can get right to the right patient at the right time. Really excited to be here. Thanks to you for the invitation as well.
Hi everybody, Vladimir Turzhitsky, but I go by Vlad, that's easier. I'm in Merck. I've been at Merck for about six and a half years. I'm in the real-world evidence capabilities and analytics group, which sits in the Merck research labs. And we focus on outcomes research for looking at real-world data and certainly different innovative capabilities, including AI and ML as well.
Hi, Usman Iqbal. I'm the CMO of Julz Pharm, a pharmaceutical physician working across different areas including R&D, medical affairs, and real-world evidence. Being in the industry for like about 15-20 years. Before that, I was in academia across, and when it comes to industry, I've worked across Sanofi, AstraZeneca, and then small to startups, pharma companies. Happy to be here and go with this start.
Okay. Well, we can put up the bios and then maybe have you go ahead and begin. We'll let you begin.
Thank you. So I believe, thank you for such a broad brush. It was hard to bring together so many concepts at the same time, so good to see you. Where it helps us is to kind of blend the topics for this panel discussion. So I have 3 different topics. So One is where we're going to go intrinsically to the heart of cellular biology, because that serves as the foundation for our understanding of the diseases as well as the targets. And then we're going to move to the clinical trial space to blend it with that. And then with Vlad on board, we have we're going to real world outcomes. So these are three very, you would see as three different areas, but they're very integrated, and our focus for this panel discussion is we're going to start from a singular standpoint, but then as the discussion moves forward, we're going to have more fluid and we will integrate that. So my first question, I would like to start with you. Good having a better time for you to be here. We have with AI and structural protein as a discipline, and computational biology and its role in the Google AlphaFold made headlines last week with three Nobel Prize, I think, winners. David Baker from the University of Washington and then two researchers. They won the Nobel Prize for their work on Google AlphaFold, which can predict the protein structures for about 200 million proteins. This level of AI scale has never been seen or operationalized before, so I think it's a very critical and advancing moment for us. But from a pharma standpoint, as you would know, this is something that pharma has been extensively doing for the last 1 or 2 decades, and they have advanced techniques to understand not just the protein structures, but also moving forward protein function and all of that. So how important scale is in this context? Because now we're talking 200 million proteins, and to what extent, besides speed and agility, the scale and the size of the effort is going to help us in bringing better drugs to the clinic. So what are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, so it's interesting. We are in an interesting period where large technology companies are investing in fundamentally foundational problems in biology. This is the biggest deal breaker for me, right? But solving protein folding using artificial intelligence, those who work in the field, a very small niche field called computational structural biology or structural bioinformatics. Everybody knew this actually. This would eventually be possible. And as a graduate student, almost 20 years ago, I attempted to do a small portion of that. Can we predict protein aggregation from sequence information? We had around 60% just by using sequence information. Can we predict protein aggregation? So the light was always on the wall, but how someone can scale the way that Google has done it. And what they've done and what they proved to the field by modeling 200 million structures and providing the structures for everybody to kind of analyze through AlphaFold database that's available for everybody is that you can learn a lot from that. So now you have view into structures like never before, right? Why structures matters in the end. If you take any disease X, for example, for the discussion, let's say you're interested in diabetes, and within diabetes you're interested in a particular pathway, and that pathway you're interested in a protein. And how do you design a molecule to target that protein? So you need structural information to do that. But having said that, we've been designing drugs with and without structural information over the period of time. There are certain structures for which we know the structural information for proteins, but we still were not able to develop a drug against it. There is still several challenges out there, and also remember that the structure that you see, if you think of the protein biology as a movie, what you get is actually just one shot. With its 3D structure, you can rotate that, but that's just one conformation. And then we often think that with all the data and all the AI and other approaches we have, what is the challenge in biology? I'll tell you one simple thing. So we now, give or take, we have around 50,000 or so genes in the human genome. You can get all that structure from AlphaFold database. But that is one picture of that protein. It could have mutation, it could behave differently in different contexts, function would be different. There's a lot of known unknowns and unknown unknowns in biology. So is it a pivotal moment? For sure. And AI could actually get us to solve the next biggest problem. That could be function prediction. The next could be interaction prediction. These problems will be solved. Ultimately, this will lead us closer to finding therapies. So that's where I'm an optimist and I practiced for almost 2 decades, and been doing this before I knew this was cool, and I believe that day will come, and it actually happened in the 20 years.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So you think the advancement would be on finding new targets or moving to the space of assessing and advancing undruggable targets?
It's in a way both, right? Like if you take the diseases for which we have therapies available, the moment you talk about let's again pick up the disease itself. We have medications that we have potentially have to take lifelong, right? Like something just in case of medical, we have to take it throughout your life. But what if we can come up with a better one? It might be a different target. So even for the diseases that we think we have solved, we need better targets. Blood pressure, atrial fibrillation, any of the conditions we can think of. We can definitely do better. That's one part. But then the undruggable or these targets that are very difficult to develop a drug against, yes, they also need novel strategies. Maybe we might have to think about non-small molecule based approaches, maybe antibody, other types of bispecifics or other types of approaches we have to think about. So the list of modalities are growing. Therapies are not just anymore just a small molecule. There could be a large molecule, could be an RNA, could be oligonucleotide. So we are all in that.
Sounds good. And going onto that spectrum, so we know we get to know and Eddie, this is probably, you can get the discussion with this can chime in. So now, let's say we know the protein structure, folding, and then even the protein function. We tease all of that out, and then drug actually goes into the clinic, and we don't really see an effect, and that happens all the time. And with cloud computing, with blockchain, and the AI convergence, now we have the ability to streamline better data interoperability with the kind of data security and privacy that previously wasn't there. With cloud computing, we can actually enhance the computing power tremendously. And with new AI, the LLMs and all of that, we can better understand the data across different areas, and we can actually share that data. Because the more we're able to share that in a more secure fashion, the more information we can see across different disciplines. So, what challenge? I mean, you presented in your slide, and that was a very nice data flow structure that we've seen. But what experts are saying that we're still scratching the surface, because there's a huge issue when we start linking. First of all, blockchain is fine, but when we start integrating through cloud computing different data sets, there's an issue with integration. There are issues when it comes to providing the kind of framework for data analytics, and then obviously to what extent these large language models that we are applying are making sense from that perspective. That's the insight that we really need to understand the concepts early on in the clinic. Again, it's a long question, but
I think I was just thinking where to start. Basically, whenever we talk about huge data sets, the biggest first thing that we see is the infrastructure. Where's the infrastructure of those companies? Because if you look at Google, AlphaFold, or Amazon, these are actually building those infrastructures right from the beginning. And in the past, what happened was the infrastructure was very much decentralized. Let's say in every technology, you have this infrastructure, then you have your core transaction where you have all these EDCs, all these data that's coming from all the molecules and tons of data. That's a transaction layer. Then you have all the data coming from these services. They form the data layer, and then you have an application layer. So these are built in a very very organized structure now, especially with companies like Google and Amazon and all these companies. That's the reason why they are able to access tons and tons of data. But at the same time, most of this Google and Amazon is still actually doesn't have most of the proprietary data. It's not integrated. Still the data sits into these pharma companies, traditional R&D companies who are not sharing the data, the value that they're generating. So that's the challenge lies in actually those data points which are still sitting from hundreds and hundreds of years, where the infrastructure is very old, then your systems inside the company itself are not able to talk with each other, and you are not able to create those application layer like what I was talking with. Like, the biggest challenge is building your better infrastructure inside the companies so that your multi-diverse, for example, even for medical affairs people, sometimes it's very difficult to speak to clinical people because of different technologies.
Plus, and I think biomarker is a very clear example, which is from at least from my experience, and which is, because this is something which is truly specialized. The biomarker knowledge should be fully integrated within the company. But what we see is that it's housed, the biomarker group is housed within R&D. Many times, most of the clinical development folks are not very well versed in the biomarker data. And even if they are, the biomarker knowledge doesn't get translated across medical affairs, across development access. The function that are actually responsible to assess the clinical utility of the biomarker. What is the sensitivity and specificity of the biomarker? What is it telling in terms of the clinical interpretation, and what is the cost? And is it going to be applicable in the real world practice? Those disciplines have to assess that, but within pharma settings right now, even the biomarker data is not cross-functionally fertilized. And so this is something which is what we're talking is very advanced, where actually I would like to ask you, like many companies are trying to attempt to use a platform-based limited integration to integrate bioinformatics with early clinical data, like PK, PD, and digital biomarkers. As I said, we have blockchain, we have cloud computing, we have computing power, and now we have the ability to integrate that within the proprietary setting. Because what Eddie was pointing it out, it has to be a proprietary setting where pharma can actually work on its own data. To what extent do you think those efforts would be successful in the near future? Should we? Considering the example that we haven't been able to do a very decent job even on standard biomarker, which is a clinical domain, much less linking bioinformatics to actual early clinical data.
So the real sweet spot, when you do early R&D and move them into clinic, is translational impact of the work that you have in the early R&D. How much of that you will translate? So think about it like this way, right? So when we look at the same two diabetes examples, you have this protein as part of a pathway, so you don't really go into humans and test it, right? So you start with some cell lines, right? And you try to knock down that gene. Hey, does it make any difference in the cell line in the petri dish? Then you go to higher experimental models, you can do the mouse models, and then you come up with the human chemistry along with that. You might have a candidate therapy, and then that will also proceed further. But then the real value is to link all of this, unless and until you link all of those. You might have a study that runs for this diabetes that runs and become eventually a success, an clinically success. But as we all know, even the most successful drug that you can think of might only be beneficial to 40% of the patient. So now the missing estimate, even though you have the most successful drug, is only treating 30 to 40% of the patient population. So what happened? Who are the responders? Who are the non-responders? Who are the super responders? So unless and until you bring this data from the clinic back to the R&D, you're not going to understand what is driving that response and non-response. So there is while our primary aim is to get a therapy, then the story doesn't stop there. So you need to understand that these are additional processes. For that is an extremely important part. There are technical limitations, even as a sponsor, we sponsor studies. Bringing that study back to us takes more time than getting data from a data whatever things like that. So that's a huge issue, and we all have to come together and see what's the way forward. But companies trying to solve that, some companies have early wins, but again, it's not a uniform aspect. So that's a huge challenge of this whole.
The good news is, data security, privacy, interoperability, blockchain can help us address that. Cloud computing, including power, can address the integration. So I think at least the theoretical more theoretical concepts of AI. To my knowledge, a couple of companies are very successfully attempting that, but it's good to hear from you that first of all it's important, and second, the attempts have to be made. If you really want to have a good handle on the biology, speaking with clinical insights, and being able to find out exactly how the disease actually interacts with therapeutics, this is something that we'll have to do. Vlad, coming to you, we talked about now, biology and clinical trials, but a lot of the time, even if we have an approved drug, as we pointed out, when it goes out in the real world, you're going to see a set number of proportion of patients actually benefiting. And so, one of the main challenges that we face in clinical trials is that we have very traditional endpoints, and then we're dealing with extremely restricted, stringent patient protocols, which restrict the patient populations. And one of the hopes with digital therapeutics is that we get more refinement of the outcomes, we get more detailing of the outcomes, and that in itself gives us the ability to look at the therapeutic effect of a drug across different dimensions. So it could be digital PK, PD biomarkers, it could be a more sustained capturing of the treatment effect through digital technologies. But when we go out in the real world, there is no infrastructure for digital data to integrate with the traditional real-world data stack. So first of all, we wouldn't be able to know the impact of those digital outcomes in the real world. And second, when we have a non-linkable data set, we clearly have an effect where we cannot really continue to transition from the clinic to the real world and make sense of these drugs in a much broader fashion. So how can we address the challenge of digital data and digital technologies being part of the mainstream clinical workflow and data capture?
Yeah, I think there's several really interesting pieces there that that's in that question. First, I think we have to kind of realize that when therapeutics and drugs go from clinical trial to the real world, that the size of the population that's being treated is vastly larger. So there's incredible potential there if we can capitalize on that information and be able to bring it back to further research. But there's, as you mentioned, there's limitations in that in the healthcare systems, only the relevant data are collected that's relevant to the patient treatment. So it limits how much further investigation can be done on hypothesis testing of why those 60% are non-responders, for example. And so, but getting the additional data and getting additional information, of course, takes cost, and who should be the bearer of that cost? I think there's been a lot of progress in real-world evidence and being able to link various sources of information, for example, claims and EMR data and lab data, survival data, mortality data, and even genomics as well a little bit. But I think there's more promise to come. The 21st Century's Cures Act puts the data more, incentivizes putting the data in the patient's hands so that patients can collect all of their data and have a more comprehensive view of the entirety of their data. And then they can choose to share that with whoever they see fit. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, but at the same time, it's a complex picture because every additional piece of data that has to be collected, there's a cost for that. So,
and diabetes, I think, is a good example. It's a mainstream disease, and we now have the most advanced glucose management, digital devices to actually manage and monitor glucose. But its penetration, I think as of last year, only 20% of the patients are actually using it, even in the real world. And even if those 20% of the patients, they're using it, but that overall data is not incorporated into the even into EMRs. Like if you want to assess your A1C, you would get some levels of measurements across different observations in the longitudinal setting, but it would not relate back to the actual stream, actual continuous data stream that you would have to see any fluctuation. But A1C doesn't really tell you anything. What you want to see is were there any spikes in glucose, were there any fluctuations, and that is something that only a digital device can tell you. But so you get an A1C, a snapshot after 3 months, but what would you like to see is what are the fluctuations, and that's something that's missing, but it's so important information. Same as with Fitbit. You have it's such a mainstream digital device, and it could be so helpful in assessing in rheumatology, in movement disorders. So my question again to you is when we even have mainstream digital devices capturing such important EKG is another one, ECG. But we still not, are we making an attempt across different proprietary databases to be able to integrate those? Because some databases do, like proprietary databases do claim to incorporate some of this digital data. How far along we are in that spectrum?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I don't have the knowledge to speak comprehensively for all the data providers, but I do know where there's a demand, the data providers do try to build a supply. I've seen, for example, integration with EKGs and more integration with imaging data. So I think it's coming along. A lot of that has had to do with access to healthcare records that are in the electronic healthcare systems. And so I think progress has been made. I think the personal digital devices, which are in the control of the patients, which the healthcare systems are not in the healthcare systems, there's still a challenge to get those, and I think that's going to take additional steps, and I don't know if it's whether the patients have to share that with their healthcare system to be able to kind of integrate those data. But even now, cardiologists are struggling to what to do with the data that's collected in the EKG from the Apple Watch. But slowly, they're starting to look at those data and interpret them. And as that's getting into the healthcare systems, I think it will slowly become accessible as a global data source and commercialized.
You expect pre-specified fields EMR for digital data by now, but I think from a standardization standpoint, you don't have that, right? Because there's so much wealth of data, but they don't show up in the EMR, and by now, for some of these areas, you would have these pre-specific fields that would have become part of the data history, but that's just not there in the EMR. But hopefully you will, consider you're hopeful too. You're all hopeful, so we'll see how that pans out.
I just want to add a comment on that, especially when you think about the healthcare provider patient interaction that we have, right? Like there are studies that shows the time they spend actually interacting is reducing, whereas on the other side, the data that around the patient is actually increasing. So that's a bit of a puzzle. Who will then interpret this? Like what's the cost of the interpretation rate? There are structure where we could interpret, but on top of this, we're talking a lot about wearables and sensors. I myself had an experience when I came to the US back in 2009, and this whole 23andMe was a craze, right? Back in 2010 or so. So I did this, and I was working as a postdoctoral fellow at the Mayo Clinic, and I took it to my primary care provider. I asked him, can you take a look at this? They said, they're not trained to do that. And 15, 16 years now, even if I take this same to the hospital down the lane here, do you think they will interpret it? No. So there is a bit of a challenge. So we have to understand that, and unfortunately that from something that's available at the cutting edge from, so we say this in bench to bedside, typically says 20 years. And that's the time we need to really think about what we can do.
That's a very timely statement with that brings us to the next question. You know, we've been molecularly profiling a lot of work. The most advanced work that we've seen in the disease area is cancer. And we've done so much work in terms of molecularly profiling both the tumors as well as the patient subtypes. And what we've seen is we would see a good chunk of information on a specific tumor when it comes to the specific mutation, the mutational burden, the gene expression, whatever, and then the oncologist will look at it, but it hasn't, the main challenge or the main frustration that we've seen, and this has been shared by outcomes experts, this has been shared by oncologists, is that they don't know how to interpret that information. Yes, we know the mutational burden, would it provide us some information that we can do some tweaks into the standard of care? We don't know. And so the question to all three of you is, with AI coming into the picture, as I said, and with the data technologies that is going to help us make most of these databases talk to each other in a much more proficient fashion, should we believe that we're going to be able to make better sense of the molecular characterization of the diseases in the context that it could actually really influence treatment decision making or not? Let's start from that.
I think the way that the AI that we have right now, is making things more efficient and is able to slowly come to the same level as humans in tasks. But in data science, sometimes there's this saying, garbage in, garbage out. So there's a limitation to what AI can do, and if the data hasn't been collected or is not linked, then there's only so much results that you can get to. I do think that AI has many areas of improving the speed with which we get to results. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, Tyler.
And I think it's a comment as well. There is not going to be any digitization of AI in healthcare because it's specific to a very, very select disease area. Like every AI model is tied in specific to a very specific disease area because human biology is so variable and it's different across different disease areas. And then you have patient variation, as Shamir pointed it out. A drug works in 30% of the patients, what happens to the 70%? That's human biology talking and providing all that variation. So the digitization is not going to happen, but I think, and to Shamir, I think a tiered, structured approach where we identify key disease areas where we really know a lot. Like we can pick certain tumors, we can pick Alzheimer's, we can pick Parkinson's, like areas where we actually know the disease biology, we know the biomarkers that actually influence the treatment outcomes as well as the disease pathogenesis, and actually develop disease-specific large language models. And companies are working on that as we speak, so a lot of that work is not going to come out, it's all proprietary. But as I said, now we have Google AlphaFold, but in the next 5 to 10 years, we should expect to see a disease-specific large language model that anybody can access through an open source platform and being able to understand better the disease pathways, the pathogenesis, as well as the targets associated with that. Are you hopeful in that context that we're going to see that?
Actually, one of the challenges we recently had was one of our clients who is a urology client, and he wants us to do a language model based on the urology data. But then when we approached most of these associations which have this urology data, they said, okay, you have to only go to this provider because he has already the proprietary, the access to the data, and they do not want to show to other vendors. So that's what is happening. If you want to do any disease-specific data, the data is not being shared openly. It is still stuck with few people there, even though it's it's an association data, but still you have to go through a certain agents. And secondly, what happens even even if you go to that company, we are not 100% sure whether the language model created by that company is really the language model that we want to create, because we are not exactly sure because of the knowledge and our clients' understanding about particular language model. So these are few challenges, like when you spoke about disease specific. One of the challenges we see is always with the disease specific databases that are out there, and only certain companies have access to it, and then certain companies have to depend on certain things. So we can still create language models which we want to, based on the access of those data points.
Just to add to that, in the industry, we have all the proprietary limitations, but there's a huge non-profit world out there. There's a huge academic world out there. There are huge non-profit scientific institutes, and they probably may not be limited about this. So, just to add to what you were going to say, I would also like your thoughts on if you're going to see a stream of large language models, disease-specific, advancing in knowledge both in terms of disease pathology, pathogenesis, and how you engage with. Is that something that we should be seeing? Not from obviously, pharma is a different beast altogether.
Yeah, maybe I take that in a sort of two parts. So going back to the original question, so we are now in this world where we can measure more, but we're not able to interpret. We measure more but interpret less. So and on the other side we have technologies like blockchain or language models and others. So what if we bring these two problems together? Like, can we have an agent that basically now says, with this agent type of language models, you can have agents designed to do certain specific tasks. So let's say to interpret the cancer genome, which is something that it's humanly not possible for a group of 3 or 4 analysts to sit down and comb through their genomic data. That's not really possible. And it's often depending on the physician group or the oncologist who's actually looking at, they look for certain patterns that they are aware of. But then in the context of that person's disease, what state that tumor is, what were the readouts from the imaging data, that's often could miss it, right? Like, so what if we have an agent that can read all of this multimodal information and recommend the best treatment pathway for that? So that's the kind of application we are yet to see. We are in a phase where if you think about ChatGPT itself, it's a 6-year-old quote unquote, there's a breadth of work happening prior to that, but GPT also is fairly, it's a 6-year-old technology. So let's think about it like, another 6 years from now, we might be using some of these agents and you will be getting a model, disease-specific model.
So we have 5 minutes more, and I think I've got one question for that anybody, and please all 3 of you can answer within a minute. So we've all seen the impact of AI in our lives, and so in our everyday work, we see a lot of influence of AI. There's a lot of investments that are happening. Also, people are under a lot of pressure to work with AI in every way possible. But as we know, it's just AI is just part of a toolkit. We have human intelligence. We have our traditional techniques that still comprise, and the traditional way of working that still is comprising 80 to 90% of what we do. With the shift in our thinking and the shift in our investment, to what extent the influence of AI has shaped your overall thinking, your project management approach, and your strategic planning?
Maybe I can start. I think AI has become very rampant in how we think about it, how we do work. Especially me. I think the opportunities for integrating large language models and AI in our workflow is growing, and it's the amount we're able to use it. It depends on how we're able to adapt to it. So, for example, one of the slides that Alicia showed demonstrated how much unstructured data there is in the healthcare records, in the healthcare systems. And that data, a lot of it may be under barriers, but with AI, if you are able to ask a question, you may build that tumor-specific model with a very general large language model, OpenAI's GPT-4, for example. And so we have to think creatively about how we're going to leverage this new technology and how it can enhance what we're doing and the speed of what we're doing. I think, again, I'm optimistic, but there's so many opportunities.
I think it's a tool, and that's how I want to define it as. It's a tool. It can do certain things well. It can amplify your productivity. That's what it's going to do. Don't have a huge expectations from that. But at the same time, some areas it can have a huge impact very quickly. Some areas it will take time. It's just like 20 years ago we got Google. Even maybe 30 years ago we moved from papers and pen and files to computers. So there has always been this kind of quantum leaps in our lives, and this is one of that. But again, it's still new right at this point. But it's a tool. Let's use it. Let's 10x our productivity. That's what my take on it.
Yeah, actually, I was in AI field for a very long time myself as well, working with IBM Watson, and after that, when generative AI came, we changed a bit more because when for us AI was more about machine learning, creating more algorithms and something like that. But with generative AI, most of our clients think it's top of the mind to have include some kind of an AI into the service delivery that we do. Because if you go and do QP data management research, then they want to actually build up all the publications that are available and come up with a model where they can actually see their opinion leaders very quickly. Medical affairs is one more area. Even one of our clients asked to drill down and create a tiering structure for all the doctors inside their Salesforce. So I think it has become very much top of the mind that whatever you present, everyone they think that AI portion has to be included.
But the fun part is, because I'm doing training in health economics and outcomes research as well. And so we use these deep learning methods in health economics and outcomes research all the time. So we've been using AI methodology in pharma all along. Bioinformatics, we name any discipline within pharma, except I would say commercial. They've been using AI methodology for the last 2 decades. It's just something where everyone's feeling a lot of pressure to hone in on everything that they do and kind of translate it from the lens of the AI. And that's just not something that I believe is going to give us the maximum impact that we are anticipating from this technology. Q&A. So.
Okay, yes, as Usman said, thank you very much for the panel, the wonderful discussion. Our Q&A audience participation. So if you have a question, please just raise your hand. We'll come around with the microphone.
Hello. So here, I'm just adding to your discussion. So when we look at it, we are trying to adapt the artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence into an existing system of clinical trial. Okay? It is analogous to you are trying to use a missile to kill a rat. When you have an advanced technology, you have to adopt an advanced paradigm or advanced system. For example, in the current system of the clinical trial, you are making a group of patients. And earlier, without any stratification, we are giving to everybody. Now, we are stratifying the patients who will be more susceptible or who will be more vulnerable. Then you have artificial intelligence and advanced translational methodologies to analyze this on-time dynamic analysis of the results from the clinical trial. When the artificial intelligence comes, augmented intelligence comes, the technology will develop. So you can see what is happening to each patient when a patient having a drug on the basis of the translational data. from there. You can change the course of the treatment. You will be able to see why a drug is working in a patient, why it is not working in a patient, because of the variability of each patient. So maybe after 10 years, when all these artificial intelligence things are working in a full-fledged way, just like warp technology to go into the interstellar travel, this will happen in this medical science field. Then, let me finish. Then, we have to consider each patient as a clinical trial. This is the where we have to apply the infinite potential of artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence. This is what my thing.
I agree, and I'm forcing comment on that. Would you like to take that? Because, I mean, this is aspirational, I would say so, but I'm not sure 10 years, but I think the timeline can be debatable, but that's what we're targeting, at least from an aspirational standpoint.
Maybe I can comment a little bit. So I think, I like your vision. I think it would be amazing. I think we have to, of course, be careful how we approach things. And every single thing that we do with AI, we have to test to make sure that it's better and evaluate how much better it is than not doing it with AI and doing it the original way. And we've started thinking about this as well. How much return on investment are we getting when we use AI as opposed to using it the old way? And how much is it actually saving us? But from a scientific standpoint, an N of 1 patient trial and having continuous monitoring and adaptation, it sounds ideal, but we have to get there. And maybe over 10 years we will, maybe over 100 years we will.
And the information that we're talking is among this. There's a clinical phenotype, which has a plethora of variables. Then we are talking about the genotype, the epigenetic profile. Then you're talking about socioeconomic and environmental factors. And those, we're talking wealth of data that actually impacts both the disease, the progression, as well as the treatment outcomes. So it's aspirational. I hope we can achieve that in this century.
So this is the same
Yeah.
when you have the.
We only have a few minutes, sorry, we should move on. Maybe we could hold that thought till after, we'll have a few minutes once we finish. Any other questions? Sorry, please.
Hi, thank you all for your perspectives. I'm very curious because a lot of the framing of tonight's issues, to me, sounds like an enterprise data architecture issue, particularly when Vlad mentioned collecting more data costs more money. Who should foot the bill for that? Should it be development or research? Should it be any other business unit? I'm curious what your experiences are at your organizations to try and draw a common or steel thread across these data sets within a single enterprise to say, this project was funded by this from the CFO, and this data set was attributed to that funding packet, in that way demonstrating value from a given data set. Have you seen anybody, or do your enterprises approach it from this standpoint?
Yeah, I'm happy to take. So one of the first thing that when I joined Sanofi 2 years ago, what I've been told was to kind of refine our data system. So we had a few data lakes here and there, and just as you can imagine, a large company with everything from most advanced Snowflake or vector database to Excel sheets and tables that you can imagine. But then how do you approach something like this, right? That's a huge problem. And then for us to do all the advanced things we're talking about, we need to get these data sorted out. And we all, in one way or the other, actually agrees that the differentiator is the data. Because algorithms, computing, others are all what you call commodities. You can get that. But the data that especially the one you generate internally, there's a whole lot of value to that. But then you need to layer with public data, private data, proprietary and whatnot. So the approach we took, and this is not the first, I'm sure many other companies have tried to build a data ecosystem that consisting of multiple data lakes. But it's designed in a way that, vertically and horizontally you can query this, One way you can go by disease. So let's say you're interested in for example, Sanofi is a science company. You can take one immune disease, but then within that disease, what are all the genomic data we have, transcriptomic, single cell, proteomic, and all the way through clinical trials. This might not be everything from one company, could come from public domain as well. But now I can go, if I'm interested in a target, I can check that whether this target has ever been tested, in what disease, what was its likelihood of success. And then, given that I have all these data, I can now build models on top of this. So that's one of the approach we are taking. Actually, we call this disease data lake, disease ecosystem, but it includes all the lake and other smaller steps of the data as well. So
Just wanted to point out the two aspects. If you're a big pharma, you can certainly take an enterprise level approach, but it also depends on how much well-versed your workforce in data science. We're talking about a multidisciplinary workforce that understands genomics, understands real-world evidence, understands clinical trial data. We're talking so much different data pieces coming together, and so different data scientists with different disciplines, with different background have to come together and make sense of it. So that requires a lot of investment, but also an ecosystem as we talked about. If you're a mid-sized to a small cap, you'll be much better off going with a disease-based approach. Because in building these enterprise-level systems, you face so much bottlenecks, and so there's a learning curve whenever you're trying to build an enterprise-level system. And you can address that by taking a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach. And as we pointed out, going disease by disease, you will adopt a good learning curve. You will learn as you go. At the same time, you can actually build that culture of learning and bringing all of these disciplines together to make sense of the data in the maximum fashion. So I think disease by diseases, especially if you're a small and mid-sized company.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Some round of applause. Thank you, Usman. We generally each month have our group photo. If everyone would like to come up here, some examples of past months here. Fiona is showing up here. We generally do kind of one serious, and then you can do one thumbs up, heart, something like that for the second picture. So if everyone could come up, if you'd like to. If not, if you're in the witness